Kerri Rawson. She lived with a killer without knowing. Chapter 1. For 34 years, Kerri Rawson lived what she believed was a normal, loving family life. Her father was a devoted church leader, a Boy Scout volunteer, and a compliance officer who worked diligently to support his family. Dennis Rader was, by all appearances, the perfect father and husband. What Kerri didn't know was that the man who tucked her into bed at night was one of America's most notorious serial killers. On February 25, 2005, Kerri's world shattered when FBI agents knocked on her door with news that would redefine everything she thought she knew about her life. Her father, Dennis Rader, had been arrested as the BTK Killer, a monster who had terrorized Wichita, Kansas for over 3 decades, murdering 10 people in brutal, calculated attacks. BTK stood for bind, torture, kill, the signature method Rader used on his victims. For 31 years, he had lived a double life so complete that even his own family had no idea they were sharing their home with the predator. The case has been featured in numerous documentaries, including Netflix's Mindhunter and investigation discoveries The BTK Killer Speaks. Kerri's story represents one of the most chilling examples of how evil can hide in plain sight, wearing the mask of normalcy and respectability. Her memoir, A Serial Killer's Daughter, provides a unique perspective on what it means to discover that the person you loved most was capable of unimaginable horrors, the psychological impact of learning that your father is a serial killer goes beyond ordinary trauma. It forces a complete reconstruction of memory, identity, and reality itself. Every childhood moment becomes suspect. Every loving gesture takes on a sinister undertone. As we explore Kerri's story, we must confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of evil and the masks it wears. How does a loving father become a brutal killer? How does a family live with a monster without recognizing the signs? If you're finding this story as compelling as it is disturbing, make sure to subscribe. The psychological journey we're about to explore will challenge everything you think you know about family, trust, and the nature of evil. Chapter 2. The Perfect Father. Dennis Lynn Rader was born on March 9, 1945, in Pittsburgh, Kansas. After serving in the Air Force from 1966 to 1970, he returned to Wichita and enrolled at Wichita State University, studying administration of justice. It was during this time that he met Paula Dietz, a devout Christian who would become his wife and the mother of his children. Dennis and Paula married on May 22nd, 1971, in what friends described as a joyful, traditional ceremony. Their first child, Brian, was born in 1975, followed by Kerri in 1978. From the outside, the Rader family embodied American middle-class values. Dennis worked as a compliance officer for ADT Security Services and was active in their Lutheran church. Serving as congregation president and Sunday school teacher, Dennis was particularly devoted to his role as a father. He coached Kerri's softball team, attended every school event, and was known among other parents as engaged and supportive. He helped with homework, took the family on camping trips, and maintained loving discipline in the household. Kerri's childhood memories are filled with moments of genuine paternal love. Dennis taught her to ride a bike, helped her with science projects, and was always available when she needed him. The family attended Christ Lutheran Church regularly, where Dennis served on committees and was respected for his dedication. Dennis was also active in the Boy Scouts, serving as a leader and taking young men on camping trips. Parents trusted him with their sons, seeing him as a positive role model who embodied Scout values of honor and integrity. At home, Dennis maintained what appeared to be a loving marriage with Paula. They rarely fought in front of the children, and Dennis was protective of his family, working overtime when necessary to ensure they had everything they needed. The Rader household operated on routine and structure. Dennis liked things organized and predictable, which his family attributed to his military background. He had specific ways he wanted things done, but this seemed like normal paternal authority. Kerri particularly cherished the special attention her father gave her. As his only daughter, she felt uniquely loved and protected. Dennis would take her on father-daughter outings and make her feel like she was the most important person in his world. Make sure to share this story with others fascinated by the psychology of hidden evil. The contrast between Dennis's public persona and his secret life becomes even more chilling. What made Dennis Rader's double life so effective was the genuine love he seemed to feel for his family. This wasn't simply an act. By all accounts, he truly cared for Paula, Brian, and Kerri. This ability to compartmentalize his life so completely represents one of the most disturbing aspects of his psychology. The perfect father that Kerri knew was real in many ways. Dennis's affection for his children and dedication to their welfare were authentic emotions. This would make the eventual revelation all the more devastating, because Kerri couldn't simply dismiss her childhood as a lie. Chapter 3. The Hidden Monster. While Dennis Rader was building his reputation as a devoted father, he was simultaneously developing into one of America's most calculating serial killers. His first murders began just 3 years after his marriage to Paula, demonstrating his ability to compartmentalize from the very beginning. On January 15, 1974, Dennis committed his first known murders, killing 4 members of the Otero family in their Wichita home. Joseph Otero, his wife Julie, and 2 of their children were bound, tortured, and killed in a methodical attack that established Rader's signature pattern. What makes this timeline particularly chilling is that Dennis committed these murders while Paula was pregnant with their daughter. He was simultaneously preparing to become a father while planning to destroy another family. Dennis's method was calculated and brutal. He would select victims through his work or by observing potential targets. His job with ADT Security Services gave him legitimate access to homes and detailed knowledge of security systems, allowing him to identify vulnerable targets. Between murders, Dennis lived his normal family life with apparent ease. He would come home from work, help Kerri with homework, attend church functions, and participate in community activities. There was no visible transition between his roles as killer and father. His crimes continued sporadically over the years. In 1977, he killed Shirley Vian, a mother of 3. In 1978, the same year Kerri was born, he murdered Nancy Fox. Each crime was meticulously planned and executed with cold precision. The BTK killer began communicating with police and media, sending letters that taunted investigators. These communications revealed a narcissistic personality who craved recognition while maintaining his secret identity. Dennis used his family as a shield in direct ways. He would sometimes bring Kerri or Brian with him when conducting surveillance on potential victims, using their presence to appear innocent. A man with children couldn't possibly be dangerous. The psychological compartmentalization required to maintain this double life is almost incomprehensible. Dennis could attend Kerri's softball games in the afternoon and plan a murder in the evening. He could lead a Boy Scout meeting and then drive past a potential victim's house. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're finding this psychological analysis as disturbing as we are. His long periods of inactivity between crimes allowed him to focus on being the perfect father and husband. These weren't just cover activities. Dennis genuinely invested in his family relationships during these periods. The most chilling aspect was how normal it appeared. There were no obvious red flags, no moments when his mask slipped in front of his family. He was simply a father who happened to be a monster, living 2 completely separate existences with terrifying efficiency. Chapter 4. Growing up with BTK. Kerri Rawson's childhood unfolded against the backdrop of one of America's most notorious unsolved serial killer cases. Though she had no idea, the monster terrorizing her community was sleeping down the hall. Growing up in Wichita during the 1980s and 1990s meant living with constant awareness that BTK was still out there. The BTK case was a defining feature of Wichita's collective consciousness during Kerri's formative years. Parents were more cautious, doors were locked more carefully, and there was underlying tension in the community. Children were warned about strangers, families invested in security systems, and BTK became synonymous with fear. Kerri grew up hearing about BTK like other children might hear about the boogeyman. What she never could have imagined was that she was getting her information about this monster from the monster himself. Dennis followed his own case obsessively, reading every article, watching every news report, and discussing the investigation with his family as if he were just another concerned citizen. He would express outrage at the killer's actions and frustration with law enforcement's inability to solve the case. At dinner, Dennis would sometimes bring up the BTK case, discussing it with the same tone he might use for any local news. He would speculate about the killer's identity and even express concern for his family's safety. The irony was lost on everyone except Dennis. The family's church held special prayers for BTK's victims. Dennis participated in these services, bowing his head in prayer for people he had murdered, comforting congregation members who were afraid, and presenting himself as a pillar of strength. Dennis's work with the Boy Scouts took on additional significance during this period. Parents were grateful to have a trustworthy man like Dennis working with their sons, especially when there was a dangerous killer loose. His reputation for safety made him even more valuable. Kerri's teenage years coincided with a period when BTK seemed to have disappeared. Dennis was entering a phase where his focus was primarily on his family and legitimate activities. During this time, Dennis was the father Kerri needed. He supported her through teenage challenges, helped her navigate social problems, and provided stability that allowed her to develop into a confident young woman. His parenting appears to have been genuinely caring. Kerri excelled in school and athletics, with Dennis cheering from the sidelines. He was proud of her accomplishments and made sure she knew it. Their relationship was close and affectionate, with Kerri feeling secure in her father's love. Make sure to subscribe to follow this incredible story of deception and survival. What makes Kerri's childhood so tragic in retrospect is how genuinely happy it was. These weren't false memories. Dennis Rader was, in many ways, an excellent father. His love for his children was real. His pride in their accomplishments was authentic. This creates a psychological complexity that Kerri would struggle with for years. How do you reconcile genuine love with the knowledge that the same person was capable of unimaginable cruelty? The answer is that you don't separate them. They coexist in the same person. Chapter 5, The Unraveling and Revelation. By 2004, Dennis Rader had been dormant as BTK for over a decade, but his need for attention ultimately led to his downfall. The 30-year anniversary of his first murders had passed, and Dennis was frustrated that his crimes were being forgotten. He wanted the world to remember BTK. In March 2004, Dennis broke his silence by sending a letter to the Wichita Eagle newspaper claiming responsibility for an unsolved 1986 murder. This communication reignited public interest and launched a new investigation phase that would lead to his capture. Dennis began a series of communications with law enforcement, sending packages containing evidence from his crimes and detailed accounts of his murders. His narcissism and need for recognition overrode his survival instincts. Dennis's fatal mistake came when he asked police whether they could trace information from a floppy disk. The police lied and told him disks couldn't be traced. Trusting this false assurance, Dennis sent a disk containing a document created on his church. Computer.forensic analysis revealed metadata that led investigators directly to Christ Lutheran Church and Dennis Rader. After 30 years of careful planning, Dennis had been undone by technological ignorance. On February 25, 2005, Dennis was arrested while driving near his home. He offered no resistance and seemed almost relieved that his double life was finally over. February 25, 2005, began as an ordinary Friday for Kerri Rawson. She was 26, married, and living in Michigan. The phone call that would shatter her world came in the afternoon. It was her mother, Paula, with impossible news. Dennis had been arrested as the BTK killer. Kerri's initial reaction was complete disbelief. Her father was a church leader, a Boy Scout volunteer, a man who had never shown violence. The idea that he could be BTK was incomprehensible. The media descended with unprecedented intensity. Dennis Rader's arrest was front-page news, and the revelation that BTK had been hiding as a respected community member made the story compelling. Reporters began dissecting every aspect of the Rader family's life. For Kerri, the media attention was overwhelming. Suddenly, her private life was being examined by strangers who wanted to know how she could have lived with a serial killer without knowing. The questions were accusatory and painful. The evidence against Dennis was overwhelming. DNA evidence linked him to crimes. His communications contained details only the killer could know, and his confessions provided horrific specifics. There was no possibility of mistake. As reality sank in, Kerri experienced complete psychological collapse. Everything she had believed about her life was revealed to be built on lies and murder. The loving memories of her childhood became tainted with knowledge of what her father was capable of. Don't forget to like this video if you're finding this story as gripping as we are. The psychological impact was devastating. Kerri felt betrayed not just by her father's crimes, but by his ability to deceive her so completely. She questioned her own judgment and her understanding of right and wrong. The revelation forced Kerri to re-examine every childhood memory. Moments that had seemed loving now took on sinister undertones. Had her father been thinking about his crimes when he tucked her into bed? The uncertainty was almost as painful as the knowledge itself. Chapter 6. The Confession and Living with Truth. On June 27, 2005, Dennis Rader stood before Judge Gregory Waller and began one of the most chilling confessions in criminal history. For over an hour, he methodically described each of his 10 murders with calm, matter-of-fact tone, showing no emotion, remorse, or recognition of the human cost. Kerri watched her father's confession on television, horrified by the clinical detachment with which Dennis described his crimes. This wasn't the father she had known. This was a stranger wearing her father's face, speaking about torture and murder as routine activities. Dennis's confession was disturbing because of its thoroughness and apparent pride. He didn't simply admit to crimes. He provided detailed accounts, demonstrating his careful planning, his enjoyment of victims' suffering, and his complete lack of empathy. For Kerri, hearing her father describe his crimes in such detail was devastating. This wasn't just admission of guilt. It was revelation of the true nature of the man who had raised her. The loving father she remembered was revealed to be a facade. Dennis seemed to enjoy the attention, answering questions with apparent satisfaction. He corrected details when he felt prosecution had gotten something wrong, demonstrating his need to maintain control over the narrative, even facing certain conviction. The prosecution presented evidence painting Dennis as a calculating predator who had used his community position to identify victims. His work with ADT had given him detailed security knowledge, while his church and scouting involvement provided trustworthiness reputation. Dennis received 10 consecutive life sentences without parole possibility. The trial revealed the extent to which he had used his family as cover, bringing his children while conducting surveillance and leveraging his reputation as a family man to appear trustworthy. The aftermath left Kerri facing a challenge few could comprehend. Rebuilding life after discovering your beloved father is a serial killer. Her first priority was protecting her mental health and family. Media attention was relentless, and she largely withdrew from public life. The process of re-examining childhood memories was particularly painful. Every interaction with her father had to be viewed through the lens of his crimes. Kerri struggled with intense guilt, wondering if she should have seen signs. The impact on relationships was profound. Some friends distanced themselves, unable to separate Kerri from her father's crimes. Others became overly curious. Both reactions were painful and isolating. Therapy became essential for survival. Working with trauma specialists, Kerri began understanding how someone could be both loving father and brutal killer. The concept of compartmentalization became crucial to her healing. Make sure to share this story with others interested in the psychology of deception and survival. Kerri made the difficult decision to change her name, seeking distance between her identity and her father's crimes. This symbolic act represented her determination to forge a new identity separate from the BTK legacy. The support of her mother, Paula, was crucial. Both women were dealing with trauma while supporting each other through an impossible situation. Their shared experience of betrayal created a bond that helped them survive. Years passed before Kerri felt ready to engage publicly about her experience. The decision to write her memoir was both therapeutic and terrifying. Sharing her story meant reliving trauma, but also provided opportunity to help others understand the collateral damage serial killers inflict on families. Through therapy, writing, and time, Kerri began developing a more nuanced understanding of her father and their relationship. She learned to hold two truths simultaneously: that Dennis Rader was a brutal serial killer and that he had genuinely loved his family. This understanding didn't excuse Dennis's crimes, but it allowed Kerri to reclaim some positive childhood memories without feeling guilty about loving the father she had known. The process of integration was slow and painful, but essential for healing. The journey from devastation to healing continues for Kerri. Her story serves as testament to human capacity for resilience and the possibility of finding meaning even in the most devastating circumstances. The woman who once lived unknowingly with a monster has become a voice for healing, understanding, and hope. If this story has moved you, subscribe to the channel to discover other real stories of survival and the incredible strength of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable challenges.